23rd, 2023 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are here with us at the old courthouse and also those joining us online. Some of you may be here to provide public comment. The Board of Douglas County Commissioners welcomes public comment and in advance thanks you for following these procedures. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Comments related to agenda items are welcome after the board has had the opportunity to discuss the topic. The Board of County Commissioners will invite comments on topics not included on the agenda during general public comment, directly after considering the consent agenda. This is time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to the general business of the Douglas County Commission. We will first call on folks who are here in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're here on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to go their full name and Douglas County residence for our minutes. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. Campaigning for public office is not allowed. We reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. Public should also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please note that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference as well. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. We had a work session earlier, and we will start this meeting with a consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Then we'll do general public comment. We have 2 items on our regular agenda, one for a follow-up on economic development funding in the 2024 budget, and another one for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Then we'll do appointments, Commissioner, Administrator, miscellaneous before we adjourn. Commissioners, do either of you have a consent agenda item you'd like to have removed for further discussion? Nope, seeing none, I'll see if any member of the public has a consent agenda item they'd like to have removed. Seeing none, I would, anybody online, Sarah? Okay. I'd take a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve items 1.1 through 1.3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I want to thank, I see Pam here. Thank you for your work on those, Pam. Appreciate that work. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. We'll move to general public comment. Is anyone here for general public comment? You may come and address the commission. You have your 3 minutes.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. Here in the last week, there's been some talk in the media about COVID mandates coming back again within the next 30 days and then being fully back by December. And if you think it's just some right-wing conspiracy theory, CNN has an article today saying experts say that it might be time to bring back masks. So this county commission here over the last 3 years put in 2 countywide mask mandates beginning with children that are as young as 2 years old. So I'm just here tonight to say, don't do it again. There is no need to. The same things still apply. Masks do not work. They've been shown that they do not work. And even if they did work, you're not our parents. We don't need a nanny state, or adults will decide these things on our own. We'll decide if our kids need to wear a mask or not. Shannon Reed doesn't even have kids making decisions like that. Definitely don't fall back on the bullshit you pulled last time saying you're just following CDC guidance. It's bullshit. And for everyone out there that's tired of this COVID stuff like I am, start holding these people accountable. Come on down to the meetings. Be visible. Don't just send them emails. Come on down here and talk to them every Wednesday night. I'll be here. It's very simple. Don't do it.
Hi, my name is Sue Herrick. I live here in Lawrence. And tonight I'm here again to remind the three of you of a fact that I've often stated. You are elected by the people of Douglas County to represent us, your constituents. You are not in your positions to represent government, be it state or federal. You are here for us, by us, and for us, and of us. You are our shield for our freedoms. All over this county, the name Free State is used. People died right here in Lawrence on August 21st, 1863, 160 years and 3 days ago, because outsiders came here to quash freedom. When government entities, be it any of the three-letter agencies, attempt to reimpose masks, vaccines, or lockdowns, tell them no. Tell them you represent free and courageous people who do not need outsiders telling them how to live and conduct their lives. Tell them we are not afraid and do not live in fear. Tell them we will not comply. Tell them we know as Free Staters that you can either get busy living or get busy dying, and we choose living. Thank you.
Additional public comment? Sarah, anyone online? All right, we'll close public comment and move on to our regular agenda items. And the first is a follow-up on economic development funding for the 2024 budget. This is for information discussion purposes only, and we'll turn it over to Sarah.
Yep. Thank you, commissioners. Just as we have some light agendas over the next couple months, I'll probably be bringing different items back to you just as pieces of follow-up from the 2024 budget development process. This is something we do every year. It's the normal course of our business, is to just sort of get additional clarity on items, and so that we're ready to go when we hit 2024. So given that our agenda was pretty light today, what I wanted to do was to just try to when we went back and listened to our notes from some of the budget discussion, I just wanted to see if we have set forth in the budget $30,000 and $105,000 that in the county commissioner's budget for kind of additional information as to what we want to, how we want to use those funds and what we want to use them for. Just for those of you that may not follow our budget process very closely every year, this is a pretty common practice for us. We do this every year. It seems like there's always a project or two that we know we want to set funds aside for it, but we haven't worked out all the details. So last year it was related to truancy and funding for O'Connell Children's Shelter and Center for Supportive Communities. And I think we had some additional funds in there for Kansas Holistic Defenders. So that's just an example of something we did in 2023. So in the agenda item report, I outlined that we have those two funds set aside, and I just wanted to get some additional clarity from commissioners as to what kind of information they were looking for on both pieces to be able to communicate that with our community partners so that we could proceed.
Thanks, Sarah. And I see we have some of our partners here, our economic development partners. I think probably the best thing to do in this isn't it's an agenda item, but there's no action. It's probably for us to have a bit of a discussion, and then we'll open it for public comment unless if anyone wants to make some public comment. And so maybe commissioners, starting with the 105,000 that we set aside in our commissioner's budget related to the minority revolving loan fund. I felt like I was pretty clear on what our outline was for that, but I want to check in with all the commissioners and see where we're at on that. My recollection of our meeting was that we were thinking that that would be matched, that once the chamber could tell us that they had public commitments or fundraising commitments of 105, we would match up to 105 on that. If that's not what we talked about, let's have that conversation now. But but we need to figure that one out. That one seems a little easier maybe than the 30,000 in my mind.
Yeah, my recollection was similar to that, matching funds that were either private donation funds or from the chamber itself as part of their budget. I think that was an item we discussed and talked about. And I think that's where we landed with it, but I would double check with others to make sure that that's also what seemed clear.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's where we landed on the conversation. I will note that I personally have I'm okay with where we landed, but I have a preference to see some utilization and some action in the program before committing funding to it. But know that we had a lot of discussion, and I will feel better about us funding it when I have a clear understanding of what the chamber and EDC's investment in the fund is, along with the community partners that it is asking for. So for me, that was the sort of the biggest, the core piece of that discussion to me was I wanted to see a little bit more balance between where all the investments were coming from. So I guess for me, what's been unclear about the conversation and what I think might be helpful for staff to have clarity about from us is I suppose a timeline, like do we pick a benchmark by which, whatever funds have been either allocated from Rising Together funds or EDC and Chambers decision about what their funds are, or other private, non-government, non-public funds that have been raised. At that point, that's sort of the dollar amount that we then match. How do we determine, and maybe it's helpful for us to understand from staff a little bit about how generally funding allocations for community partners look in terms of a timeline for your staff and the workflow of budget staff who are administering those dollars.
Yeah, we have two different types of payment arrangements for community partners. Partners that are on the community partner agreement receive payments twice a year. And those are just equal payments based off of, take their amount and divide it in half. Those community partners that have moved to service agreements in most cases are paid quarterly, based off of an invoice, where they provide us with a detailed report of their metrics for that period. Some of them, I think, still have some monthly payments in there. I don't want to say there's nobody in there that does monthly, but they're all invoice based off of, they delivered to us, a report on how the progress is moving on the project. So what I'd like to do is not like, hey, we raised $5,000, cut us a check for $5,000. I'd rather us do hit either they meet the goal of the 105, or they get close to that at a certain point, and we come back with like larger chunks, just so we're not cutting a bunch of extra checks.
I guess my thought was that the entirety of 2024 would be available for kind of that fundraising process, should they choose to take that long, but maybe only a couple of draws, so that we're not, burdening the staff with a lot of other additional paperwork. But then when they have a significant amount, they can put in their invoice for that. Was what I had envisioned, but I guess we had not really hammered that out.
Yeah. Commissioner Reed, I'm interested in hearing more from you about action. Are you thinking action on the matching side or action on the grant side?
Yeah, good, fair point. Fair question to clarify. I would like to see utilization of the fund. So to actually see, I think I used the phrase proof of concept during our budget hearings, to see that there are some businesses who have gone through the steps to apply for the loan, receive a loan, have that serviced, see how, I would just like to hear how it's going before making an investment. That was my personal preference and where I was at. But we're a 3-member body. And so knew that was, sort of the dissenting opinion, or an opinion that only I hold. So yeah, I think that's just my personal preference. But otherwise, in terms of, the action on fundraising, if there's going to be additional fundraising, or just deciding where to allocate from the chamber and EDC. I'm just interested to hear whatever their response to that challenge that we gave them is, and take the conversation from there. I think for us, figuring out what feels like a reasonable time frame to plan to sort of bring that conversation back and know if they've met that, if they're ready to come back to us, I suppose, and say, here's what we have. We would like to cash in on that matching. Also, I just wanted to double check with Sarah. Does the fact that it's one-time funding have any impact on what you just described in terms of the two ways that you typically distribute funds? Okay, I'm seeing a head nod no, and I
Not
didn't think it
necessarily,
would.
no.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So what I hear, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, and Sarah jump in here, that's almost more of a service agreement, as they are preparing loans and or approving those loans, they would say, okay, we have the ability to give you this loan, and the county is going to match each, and they would come in. Is that what you're thinking? Oh, yeah.
No, sorry. I feel like I'm making it more complex, and I don't mean to regress the conversation too much. I want to move forward, and we made a commitment that we would match the 105, and I just think we have some nuts and bolts to figure out about that. I was just sort of reiterating that I would prefer not to fund this request, is where I was in the budget process and where I still am, and maybe reconsider it next year upon seeing that there has been actual utilization of the revolving loan fund, and to have a bit of a feedback loop about how that's going so far, even with just a few. Knowing that it will probably be a little bit of a slow start. So because there is money that already exists, because the program is open, I would like to see utilization of it before we fund it.
And I would say that's pretty common, commissioners, like when we ask for additional on truancy, when we're working with O'Connell's Children's Shelter and CSC, we ask them to bring us back additional information and a report from Panwegian on our work on truancy with the school district. So normally in this process, you would get some deliverable before and it would come back to the county commission before you'd say, all right, Sarah, we're good with releasing the 105. So while it's not a full-blown service agreement, which I'm still, ideally it should be stated where our goal is to move every community partner to a service agreement over time. So it's going to happen eventually. But this would be something more specific for this one-time ask, like what kind of deliverable would you like to see? And then, brought to the commission. Obviously, it'd be a public agenda item. There could be discussion.
So I guess my question, and maybe it's for Commissioner Reed, is, are you looking for like a report and feedback before that money is released? Or are you looking for a specific metric, like this many loans with this many dollars out in the community?
Yeah, I've thought about that, and it feels hard for me to grasp what any of those specific metrics would be a little bit, because there are revolving loan fund models that were considered in the building of this one, but in terms of how it's going to function locally, I think there are a lot of unknowns. So I think for me, what it really just boils down to is I would be more comfortable knowing, because it's already been funded, because there's money in the pot to start giving people loans, I would just feel more comfortable knowing that it's working and how it's working. And I think that would help us then determine maybe what some goals or benchmarks are for the future. I don't know how to name those at the moment. And I don't want to assert those as somebody who has not been a large part of the conversations along the way and a bit more peripheral to it. I suppose it feels to me like a little bit of experience under their belt, so to speak, would help us identify some potential benchmarks and where to go, or what sort of an appropriate amount of money or reasonable amount of money is to ask for. That's just where my head is at with it. I don't know if that helps clarify for either of my fellow commissioners.
Yeah, and I also hear you hedging a little bit, like committed it almost move forward is what I hear,
Yeah.
but I want to say, like, we have done this before with truancy partners, and this feels natural in that sense that and having visited with some of our economic development partners, I think it'd be good for them to come to us and sort of walk us through how that, we talked a lot about the loan amounts that were coming and how they got to that amount, and sort of, I'd like to hear a little bit and just ask some questions about how e-community funds are working as well in this space, and what those levels are at. I know we have some different loan programs that's trying to get some capital into the system at different levels. And it may be good to have Jill talk about some of the things that's happening through e-communities, or another member of that group, or Network Kansas, and how that's operating, and also have the chamber come. So it doesn't sound like you're actually looking, and I don't know where I am about service agreements yet, but on this one, but I think we're just looking to get more clarity on the project, what we've learned from it before we move forward with that. That's what I hear you saying. Is that?
Yeah, I think that that's a fair summation, and I guess there's just, I am hopeful, but I'm also a skeptic. And so that's part, what I'm weighing out. And what if a year from now there's been one or none, applications for $15,000, and the feedback, or 15,000 or less, and the feedback is because people need more, and that wasn't an option, and therefore they explored other avenues. So are we going to front load a fund that may not be functioning the way that it's currently envisioned, and therefore how to adjust? And I suppose it just feels a little bit, the 105 amount feels a little arbitrary at the moment in the grand scheme of all the other sort of amounts and possible pieces of that pie, so to speak, without knowing whether or not a year from now there'll be some loans in service and money is moving, coming and going from that fund.
Yeah, I'll just say, I would like to, I think it would be enlightening to hear, and we did hear some at our hearings, but having visited with some of our partners on this, I think they'd like to address a few other questions that came up that maybe we didn't ask, maybe we needed a little bit longer time with them. And I think that follows what we've done with the commissioner's budget, is to have those conversations. My goal long-term is to have a much larger fund here, and to really do some impact work across the community. And so if more conversation helps us get to that point, that sounds great. I will agree that I think we heard 1 million, and then we heard 500,000 in our hearings. And I just like to understand more about how we got to that overall goal. So having them come back sounds fine to me. And I'm sure that they would welcome the opportunity. I guess we can ask them here in just a little bit to share with us, welcome the opportunity to give us more information and about the program.
So I just want to see if we can start some clarifications, and we might hear more from partners as they come up about what counts for the matching funds. So we've specifically said, private donations to the fund would count. So I assume that also means like private foundations, if they were to raise that through grants, would count for that. Chamber funds, like Rising Together, would count. So that kind of leaves, when I had conversations with some of the chamber folks involved with the program, we talked to them about the staff dollars and the overhead dollars that had gone into creating the program, which were actually more significant than I had anticipated hearing. So that kind of begs one more question of like, how much is there a portion of that that has been a cost to the chamber, but it's not specifically dollars in the revolving fund, if some of that counts as matching for us or not. So I just put that out as a question, because I think we'll hear probably more when partners come up.
Yeah, I think, thanks for making that point, Commissioner Billy. That is, that would be helpful to understand. I think along with that, it'd be helpful for me to understand where the staff capacity and administrative work lies between chamber staff and Small Business Development Center, because what I recall from our conversation during the budget hearings was a lot of emphasis on Small Business Development Center being the entry point for entrepreneurs that were exploring this option, and working with them through the application process to Truity to then service the loan, but that sort of support, coaching, mentorship, whatever phrasing, that they're using, was my understanding, or my takeaway from that conversation was that it was going to live predominantly with Small Business Development Center staff. And maybe that's not true. So I think that would be helpful for me to understand in terms of where is the work. There was the front end work of development of the fund, and now the work of administering it and keeping up with the flow of how those potential applicants come.
Those would be great things we can ask.
And I guess I want to clarify a couple things. Also, as the commission knows, you provide base funding level of support for the Chamber EDC, and then through that, the Small Business Development Center. So if staff time is being used as a soft match for those resources, you probably already paid for a portion of that match up front. So I'd like some clarity if that's allowable or not. And I guess I feel like I should state for the obvious, I asked for this item to be on the agenda for clarity. I did not specifically invite our partners because I was looking for commission guidance on this. And I just don't want it to seem like, I was just trying to get you to clarify your voice on this. And this is an opportune time for us to do it. And so I was not told to, I was told that this was a commission conversation. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Feel like we're sort of settled on the 105. I think there's still some.
I feel like
I think
have
we
lot.
need a presentation that tells us more about the costs, and I am direction to Sarah to tell our community partners, like I am fine if they want to sort of walk us through how they got to the match, and then we can react to that. But that's where I'm fine with. Yeah, I mean, that's where I am.
Yeah, same. And I just want to make sure that, Sarah, you feel like that was helpful and clarifying enough for you in terms of how to bring that more detailed, nuanced conversation with partners back to us in the future.
Yep. And just as with all items with the 2024 budget, none of this will probably come back to you until 2024 because these funds are allocated next year. All right. I think I have enough on 105. I appreciate it.
One of the things as we move into the other part that I want to articulate and sort of reassert is this idea of moving to service agreements. And even, we have to think about, do we have the staff capacity to move everybody to a service agreement? That might be our long-term goal. But I think it's important for all of our community partners to hear that, key performance indicators and metrics are what we're looking for when it comes to funding. That's been a change over the last couple of years. We've had a lot of success with some of our partners with data dashboards and nice reporting to us about the impacts we're making. Activities are fantastic, but what I'm really looking for is to be able to say, for $30,000 worth of investment, this is the increase in tax base we got. This is the number of new jobs at these wages that we got. In my mind, economic development should be clearly a investment that we make that has a large return, and a return that comes back to a more diversified tax base, not so reliant on residential, but on commercial and industrial. And so when I'm thinking about that $30,000, what I'm really hoping for is that we can start to make some progress with our partners on, these are the metrics that we're trying to capture, and metrics that are not soft and like we think it's about this, but are very clear, and we can have confidence in their accuracy.
Mr. Chair, I would kind of clarify that it's not just about that 30,000 or any of these smaller pieces, but we fund a much larger portion of Chamber EDC functions, and those metrics would be about that investment and not just these pieces that we've pulled out for further discussion. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I saw the 30,000 as an opportunity to have that conversation moving forward. If we want to have the same agreement we've sort of had in the past, which to my knowledge didn't have any metrics attached to it, then then it's the funding that it is. But this 30,000 is sort of trying to get us to move to a more service-based approach here.
And I saw the conversation about the 30,000, which I wasn't leading that conversation, so kind of lean on others to have it more, was really a way to capture some, for us to have a level of confidence that diverse partners were being brought into the Small Business Development Center, brought into the conversation, brought into, loan opportunities, that I thought it was a question about diversity, that those were the metrics we're looking for with the 30,000, which I think is totally doable and a very reasonable thing to ask for. Whereas I would take kind of your other conversation about kind of larger goals with economic development and how we work with all of our partners to clarify what we're looking for, but also to clarify with them what pieces of that they are bringing forward.
Yeah, I think for me, both and, it's sort of that I want to, I think the way that the conversation around the request for the 30,000 is a supplemental request to add to what they have been giving, or to restore a former amount, what we have been giving to them annually. And I think we sort of boiled it down to it, and I introduced the conversation about sort of the Forward Cities E3 tour and the strategic doing actions and work that has been in development since February between a number of economic development partners. And I think, well, I wonder if one takeaway from that conversation was that people heard that the $30,000 was being set aside for a specific project or program born out of that. And that is not, that's not the goal for me, but I am hoping that it is a catalyst for really encouraging our partners to talk to us, the chamber and EDC to talk to us about how they are working with all of the economic development partners, and make that clear to us what those relationships are across all of the economic support organizations, Peasley Tech, KUIP, all of them, to around some of the themes and topics that we talked about with regards to entrepreneurship and expanding the definition of economic development, right? And so to your point, Commissioner Kelly, that I would love to be able to see more tangible, relatively concrete, solid numbers about what that larger return is in terms of contribution to the tax base, because that is sustainable growth that has big community-wide impact, right? And I'm also interested in us having and continuing to challenge our partners and having a more expansive discussion and view of what economic development is. It's increasing tax base. It's making a really healthy and robust ecosystem, and everybody playing their part in that to be able to start businesses and have businesses that thrive here. So that there's a variety of ways that we can interpret what economic development looks like, and really increasing public health and our tax base. Childcare is a piece of that conversation. So I feel like the 30,000 set aside is an opportunity to bring them back for more conversation about both things. One, how do we develop how do we identify some tangible types of metrics and outcomes that we want to look for in the future with them as our community partner? And how do we grasp what our investment returns to the county at large? And to be very clear about what the collaborative nature of all of those organizations that talk a lot and are in a lot of rooms together and a lot of spaces together working on similar initiatives, but all have their own piece of the puzzle that contributes to that ecosystem. I want to understand that more clearly. So I think that's what the sort of E3 edge to it is, not necessarily that I was looking for or expected some sort of specific project or program for that to fund. I just think that it helps us challenge those partners to come back to us with a more robust conversation about that, and how we maybe restructure what our annual funding for that community partner looks like in years ahead.
So for this year, is the deliverable, the conversation and an active and ongoing conversation between the commission and economic development partners? Or is there, and then we're setting up for future deliverables, or is there something more specific and tangible that you want to see tied to this funding?
I think as part of that, I would like to understand and maybe hear collectively from sort of like Small Business Development Center and Chamber in particular come to mind, just because of, money is passing through Chamber to SBDC. SBDC has been heavily involved in a lot of the E3 and entrepreneurial ecosystem discussions. So I want to hear more clearly what the collective work has been and what the plan to keep fostering that environment looking ahead. I don't know that that's a very tangible deliverable. So I say that all recognizing that it's a little squishy.
I want to be partners with our economic development partners and challenge them to sort of, I'm not an expert in economic development. That's not my area. But I think I am an expert in it, helping people find what a goal is and how to identify how we're going to measure that goal. And so I think it's possible that our partners could come back to us hearing some of this conversation and say, based on what I've heard you say, maybe we need to look at the number of starts that happened at the Small Business Development Center and how many actually became businesses, and what are the spreads of those over different racial groups, different gender groups, because I hear that's embedded there and as well. How were services referred to at Peasley or through KUIP, so what are those connections and touch points? It's, this sounds crazy, but that happens in human services as well. That's what we ask for in human services. We actually have a tracking system within human services for understanding where a potential client is and how many times they've interacted with our system, that we can keep some data on. Is there something that we could do similar to that within our economic development sector? So we were making sure that any entrepreneur that came into the system or any potential employee who needed training, are they going to Heartland Works and they're going to Peasley Tech, and did they find a job? Did they find a job out of that? So that's what's happening in my brain when I hear you talk, and I trust that our economic development partners can help us sort of flesh that out and give us some accurate details of how that might work.
I'll ask for just a bit of clarity. So Small Business Development Center does not just startup businesses and new entrepreneurs, but also kind of mid-range and growing businesses too. And all of that could fall under, you were really targeting kind of early businesses, but all of that is economic development and would fall under your curiosity here.
Yeah, you're highlighting my inexpertise here. So thank you. It's okay. But that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, come back to us, just as we said on the earlier discussion about the minority loan fund. They may have different funding points that we haven't considered. Bring that to us. Now they know that, what we're really looking for is a metric to be able to gauge their work by.
So are we looking for like a future presentation? I know we have a lot of partners that happen to also be in the room with us today and can give some feedback just in the public comment portion, but certainly not put on the spot for a presentation. Are we looking for a future presentation, or are we looking for a work session where we sit down and have not only kind of that information from partners, but also a chance to kind of give feedback and have us learn and then learn from us?
I say, commissioners, we've done it a couple different ways in the past, depending on the project. So if you have a work session where we discuss where things are at, you can't take any action to release those funds or to move those funds in that session. So we'd have to place it on a future agenda to then, go ahead and make the allocation. But, I think we could, we've done it both ways, but it sounds like to me, you really want, you want some additional feedback and information on a presentation in this space too. around the intersections of the Forward Cities work, entrepreneurship, and the Small Business Development Center, with additional metrics and data in terms of how that work is quantified and illustrated.
And so that was where I was getting to, is like, is the conversation the deliverable, in which case those funds are automatically released once we have that conversation because we've determined that's the deliverable? Or are we looking for I'd like to give, if that's not the case, then like what are we looking for so that they know how to meet that goal so that funds can be released?
Yeah, I liked your idea of a work session, and then it's probably a presentation. The work session may be more brainstorming and us continuing to clarify on more of a discussion. That's the way I think of work sessions. And then the presentation would be based upon that work session. Here is our ask, to release that funding. That's what's in my head right now.
That works for me.
Yeah, I think we'd be glad to work with our partners on putting something like that together.
Well, with that, unless commissioners have anything else. Okay, we'll open it up for public comment.
Hi, Gene Dorsey. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I thought I'd bring the newspaper with me today. There's 4 pages of unpaid tax bills in the newspaper today totaling $3.2 million. And that's last year's rates, not the current rates. We have a significant problem with property taxes in this county, and I think we should be doing everything to encourage commercial, industrial, and new businesses to help share the tax burden. I don't know where you came up with you must have matching grants. I don't think the taxpayers ever said that. I think that's your idea. And I noticed you spent 20 minutes talking about $130,000 for the chamber to help develop commercial activities. You didn't spend that much time on putting in the $249,000 to pay off a mortgage for artists helping the homeless. And they don't even have matching funds. You're just giving that to them. So you ought to take this in a bigger context. If you have problems cutting the checks periodically, just give them the money up front and then ask for a refund of what's not spent at the end of the year, if you're worried about it. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Bonnie Lowen, the President and CEO of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for this opportunity to talk. During the hearing process, there were questions about return on investment and data and metrics. And to be quite honest, we're a little unsure on what you're looking for. So having the clarity around that question, I think is a great point. And we are partners with you. I think we all want the same thing. We want economic health of our county citizens. We want to increase the tax base, and we want to increase the quality of life for our citizens. When it comes to Diversified Douglas County, which is the new name for the revolving loan fund, there was a comment about Rising Together plan, and the Chamber EDC was only putting in $30,000. I can tell you that a program such as that takes a tremendous amount of staff time. And I know Jill spends a lot of time with the community loans. Joshua Fallleaf has most recently worked on this. He was part of our staff in October. Prior to that, Ryan was working on this as well. And incidentally, if you want to get in the weeds with the program, Joshua, I think, is on Zoom. He was unable to join us in person. But Commissioner Willie, I appreciate you pointing out that, or at least that's what I was hearing, that the hours and hours that are spent in organizing the plan, getting the policies, working with our partners are real costs. We're a very lean staff. There are so many opportunities for us to work in the economic development field. And this is one thing that Joshua has spent about 100% of his time since he's been with us. So to me, that is a real commitment in addition to the dollars. Commissioner Reed, you were talking about how you want to see the program advance and what that looks like. And I think that's a fair statement. There are questions about, is $15,000 the right amount? This plan was patterned after one in Wyandotte County. There's not necessarily a magic number, but that's a start. And I think with this plan and with the success, we can continue to evolve from there. And again, with our partners, with the county and the city has also put in dollars to help support that program. We can make a good program, a great program. And finally, working with our partners, we have great economic development partners. We're on each other's boards. We talk a lot. We don't want to duplicate services because there isn't enough time and that isn't very efficient. So I want to assure you, we work very closely with our economic development partners and we count the county commission as the same. Thank you for your support.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Eldridge. I own a certified woman-owned business in Douglas County, and I also serve on the chamber board this year as board chair. I just wanted to comment. I think our CEO did a great job of defining a couple of things, I think. However, I wanted to make a couple of comments, and that is that I am really, really proud of the broad view of economic development that our chamber has taken on in their strategic plan, as well as the successful Rising Together private capital campaign and its key measurements that are included in there. Fostering an equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem, let's just say E3, is a priority of the chamber and the EDC, the city of Lawrence and Douglas County. The revolving loan fund for minority entrepreneurs called Diversified Douglas County is an effort in alignment with that priority of all of us. The chamber is dedicated, as Bonnie had mentioned, hundreds of hours of paid staff time and they've collaborated with other community groups that do work in this space. For example, members of E3 and Black 30, as well as others. Alongside with the Small Business Development Center, the chamber formed an advisory board to identify needs, identify the application process, what that would look like, and also to negotiate a favorable agreement with the financial institution that would be servicing the loans, Truity Credit Union. It was questioned during the budget hearings, why was it $500,000? And maybe first it was $1 million. Wasn't a part of that conversation. And then it was backed off. So I pulled out my Rising Together that I carry with me all the time. And under Initiative 2, it is establish a $500,000 revolving loan fund for minority and women-owned businesses. I just want to say as to the amount that could change. However, as a business owner, there were many, many times, and especially in the infancy of my business, that $15,000 could really make a difference to me. Also want to say I've used as a seasoned business owner the services of SBDC. I didn't recall them asking me to report back on the advice that they had given me and the information. But that I just wanted to comment on that too. It's something I'm proud of. The chamber's taken this revolving loan fund onto its plate, along with all of the other initiatives in Rising Together for our community. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for your service. I actually wasn't going to comment, but the two opening comments prompted me. I had the fantastic experience in this community serving on our unified command with Sarah, with public health, with our city, our county. And that was a remarkable experience. And the outcome of that was frankly fewer mortalities, fewer hospitalizations, less impact on business and families. It was an important moment in our community. And I think the common elements of that I recall among many probably was the notion of trust and proven partners and colleagues. And the second aspect was really recognizing expertise where it lies. I'm here because I've been on the chamber board for maybe 4 years. I get to follow Kristen in the role of chair. I have come to see that board and that leadership team as an impeccable group of people, super high integrity. By the way, we just had our audit report today and it was completely clean for the, I don't know how many years in a row. But the chamber is already your trusted partner. They are all about, and they have the expertise in this arena. And I hope that you give a lot of space to that. I think I understand the importance of accountability as a public serving body. And that, thank you, that we can't be willy-nilly about it, and would think that some of the elements discussed would be perhaps more important if this were an unknown entity with unknown leadership and unknown partners. But I think the chamber's really demonstrated their commitment to the common purposes that we share together through Rising Together, and only half of its elements really being about business, but a lot of it being about improving our community and our workforce. So when the pandemic, the COVID comes back again, we stand ready to be your partner again and to be courageous with you as you were before. And I hope you will give this a positive determination. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, we'll check online. Anyone online? Okay, this is not an action item. Commissioners, if you have any other comments you want to make? No?
I guess I needed a little bit of clarity.
Yeah.
On the 30,000, was it consensus that staff soft match dollars could be used? I heard private donations or Rising Together donations. So I just need a little bit of clarity on that piece.
I think what I remember saying was that we were going to ask our partners to come and explain how they were doing the math.
Got
If they think that staff dollars are there, let's hear that. Let's have that
Got it.
discussion.
Okay,
That's
I
what
appreciate it.
yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Just kind of wanted to make a couple of overall comments. I don't really like the idea of base funding. That's been a way we've talked about ongoing funding to community partners, but so I'll use that. In terms of the partnership between the County Commission and the Chamber and EDC, that is strong and has always been strong. And I think that shows that the base funding that was requested was never in question in our hearings whatsoever. These were 2 additional requests. They were supplemental requests, and we were pretty cautious about those this year because we were definitely wanting to cut mill levy in throughout our budget discussion. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. And in terms of capital improvement projects, which I would put, the revolving loan fund into that, because it is, money that will stay there and continue to be a long-term investment in the community. Braided funding was the discussion through all capital improvement projects. Some of our partners brought that to us kind of automatically, and some of those we had to kind of ferret out some of those details. So I think that's, in terms of asking for a match, I think is consistent with how we talked about capital improvement project funding from other partners too. So just put that out there.
Yeah, I just, for one, I want to thank fellow commissioners. We don't get to do this a lot, to just talk about these things. It's a unique board in that there's three of us, and so we can't talk to each other outside of these spaces. So as we have those budget hearings, we compress a lot of values and ideas into a very tiny space for a very long period of time, with each one needing our full attention. So I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope it provides more clarity for our economic development partners. I appreciate Russ talking about unified command and the success of that. And I want to point out that he started out with metrics. So he started out with lower mortality rates. We actually have numbers that show that unified command had value. And it's not, in my mind, because we don't trust the people we work with. It's that it gives us goalposts to aim for. And if we just say, well, let's just trust in the expertise, then I think, I mean, I don't get to do that as a county commissioner. I don't get to do that as working for schools. I have state assessments that we have to do. All those things come into play. And I think it's really important to say, if we're going to put if we're going to aim for something, let's decide what we're going to aim for, and let's decide together and set our goals high. Because then we can achieve way beyond what we expect to when we set those goals high. We might not reach them, but let's set them high and have confidence in our collective expertise, our collective passion, that we can work together to hit those goals. So I appreciate those comments, and it's always nice to be reminded of the success that came in this county through some collaborative work, and I'm sure economic development will be the same. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is about the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Thanks, commissioners. Katie Fitzgerald is here, our criminal justice coordinator, and I just thought she could give us a brief update on some of the various initiatives she's working on. So.
I can.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. I plan to be brief. I wanted to give you guys kind of share an update. I'm not sure how often or how recently CJCC kind of as a whole has been.
Long time.
I'm trying to advance my slide and it will not go. Oh, never mind. Got it. Okay. I got it, Eric. Thank you. So I wanted to kind of start by revisiting just history about CJCCs in general. How did they come about? And then in Douglas County, where did that come from? So CJCC's Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils as informal bodies came out of the work of the National Institute of Corrections decades ago, as they were providing technical assistance to jurisdictions struggling with jail and prison populations. By design, the criminal justice system is fragmented, where no one authority, level, or branch of government is responsible for the entire process. Rather, criminal justice systems are composed of numerous court, offices, and agencies that are represented and led by appointed and independently elected officials who often work across different levels of government and in different positions situated in their jurisdictions. Despite this arrangement, it is essential for these agencies to work together to effectively carry out their roles and responsibility. and without coordinated planning efforts with system agencies, jurisdictions can often experience duplicative efforts in issues related to public safety, jail, or court operations, which can often increase overall costs of local services or produce unintended effects. CJCCs provide a forum for this coordinated planning to occur by providing space for independently elected and appointed leaders to come together to work on issues that impact the community and the system as a whole, while also recognizing and maintaining the independent nature and relationships of their agencies. CJCCs bring together elected officials, government administration, and community decision makers to support the operation of jurisdictions' criminal justice systems. And the overarching goals of CJCC are to facilitate information sharing, promote interagency collaboration, and problem solve local challenges while minimizing inefficiencies and making the most use of a jurisdiction's limited resources. So to that end, Douglas County established CJCC by resolution of the county commissioners in March of 2016. The most recent resolution that has been updated, which I think was mostly updating bylaws, was in February of 2019. Currently, the purpose of the CJCC in Douglas County is to provide, the purpose of the council is to provide a working forum to support communication and collaborative coordination between and among key criminal justice system officials, advisory bodies, agencies, departments, and community members to promote public health, public safety, and an effective, equitable, and efficient criminal justice system in our community. So over the last year, so it's been just over a year since the CJCC has had a coordinator again. So I wanted to kind of share highlights of what the CJCC has kind of done in that time. And I would also share that while this may not look like a lot to some people, I have tried to be in my role very intentional about getting a good lay of the land of Douglas County and our partners, while establishing relationships with all of our partners and listening to their needs and their energies in this space. So last August, we completed and you all received the initial law enforcement traffic and pedestrian stop study, which was commissioned by the it was commissioned to be completed by the, researchers out of Northeastern University. In November of last year, we were accepted as a council into the National Network of Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils, which I will refer to as the network from here on. This network, we've talked about, I know Commissioner Reed mentioned it in her commission items a couple of weeks ago, and Sarah had shared this when we were first accepted. This network is convened and supported by the Justice Management Institute. And you pause because we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So we were officially accepted as a one of the 41 members across the country into that network. Bless you. In December, we received the Vera Institute of Justice report on jail population drivers. Over the course of the spring, so we began meeting every other month, which has been a change. So over the course of the first couple of meetings in the spring of this year, we spent a lot of time trying to get folks to say, where are we at? The work that we've previously been doing, where do we want to continue? Where are we wanting to establish new areas of focus? It'll be a more formal strategic plan next year. But so we spent our first couple of meetings this year doing that. In the summer, so we started a couple of new work groups. And then in August, at our most recent meeting, we have continued to collect data and provide reports on the law enforcement traffic stops. And looking forward the rest of this year, we will begin technical assistance with JMI around assessing our CJCC against best practice standards. So over the next couple of slides, these will not, was not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but at a high level, a lot of the work that the CJCC over the last several years has been doing, we anticipate, has been continuing. So law enforcement traffic stop data is a big area that our law enforcement partners have agreed to continue and receive that data formally kind of once a year. So they just did that. Continued evaluations of programs and services, which our senior data analyst, Matt Cravens, does for programs that a lot of them kind of fall under CJS, but were born out of the CJCC. The Racial and Ethnic Disparities Work Group is a work group that has been established. That was one of the original work groups of CJCC, and that work has continued. And there's a lot of effort, I would say, in kind of energy, at least on my part, to continue supporting the shared space of behavioral health and criminal justice, particularly through Familiar Faces Initiative and working with partners. So worked a lot with PM staff and criminal justice services and court services around trying to identify where gaps exist for those staff and their clients being able to consistently receive behavioral health services. Where do we need to build out some of those connections? So that is all work that has continued. The couple of new work groups that we have started, which admittedly are kind of slow. This has been tedious to really unpack, and it's been slow. So there's that. The two, oh, go ahead.
Well, Katie, I don't know if that's a fair characterization. These are very complex areas of work related to all the different reasons why folks may fail to appear for a court date and why probation violations happen. So while it has been slow, it is because it is extremely complex, and we're trying to do our due diligence to really unpack all those characteristics, plus the complexities of multiple data systems with the state conversion from full court to Odyssey. So I'm not going to let you quite take all the hit for it being a slow process.
I appreciate that. It's challenging to really unpack. Our partners, particularly in the failure to appear work group, I think are really engaged and really, like Sarah said, do want to be sure that we understand what we're seeing, and that we're being diligent in that space. So that's kind of what we have been doing, what we anticipate continuing. And what I'm most interested in wanting to at least make sure that I share with you all. Again, I know Commissioner Reed mentioned this a couple of weeks ago after our last CJCC meeting. But part of, so the network of CJCCs hosts an annual meeting every year of the Criminal Justice Council coordinators, or whatever that position looks like for them. And in June, we met in Milwaukee. And while we learned and spent a lot of time with learning about services that were in our host city and county, the highlight of this year's annual meeting was spending a lot of time and diving into the recently published standards and essential elements of CJCCs, which is a result of a lot of research by the National Institute of Corrections and the Justice Management Institute around thinking about these kind of groups of folks who neither one oversees the other or governs the other, but it's really important for all of these folks to be at the same table, working towards the same thing. What are the factors? How do we make sure that those groups are functioning the best that they can? And so through a lot of research between those two organizations, they've really kind of identified these standards, so 13 standards. Then there's 10 essential elements and key factors that really help to operationalize the high functioning and performance of CJCCs. So those were released officially, I think in May is when they were published. And so we spent a good deal of our time in Milwaukee walking through these documents and thinking about how our own CJCCs kind of fall out into, where do we do well? Where do we think we might be struggling? And JMI has created an opportunity for jurisdictions to tap into technical assistance from their staff to participate in an assessment process with them. So the JMI staff who are really kind of our experts on CJCCs have made themselves available to jurisdictions who are interested in going through this kind of fairly in-depth process. So we are, I anticipate that you'll hear more about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but these are the standards. The essential elements. So this is part of what starts to operationalize the functioning of groups, of coordinating councils and groups like CJCCs. And we did talk about part of also what that toolkit includes is an assessment tool that is designed to help identify where are places doing, where are jurisdictions doing well, where are they not. It's kind of rated, it's not a yes, no, it's rated on kind of a Likert scale around from fully compliant to not compliant. And then it's very detailed around which of the factors under each essential element are present. It feels very objective for me. So I have not sat down and like assessed hours like through the tool, but if I'm walking through it, it feels very objective. There's a lot of mostly compliant as evidenced by what? As evidenced by this, and this. And here's what this jurisdiction CJCC has in place for this. So it's very detail oriented, and I think it will be really helpful for us. So we had proposed at our last CJCC meeting in August to engage with JMI, engage in a contract with JMI to participate in this process with them while they have bandwidth and openings for jurisdictions. So their process is estimated to be about 7 to 9 months, depending on how many meetings we need to have them. They do a lot of observation and a lot of meeting with stakeholders and then a site visit, which I anticipate would we'd coincide with the presentation here. We executed that contract last week, at the end of last week, and we will be officially kicking off this process at our September CJCC meeting. That's all I had. I hope that was enough of an update for you guys, but I'm happy to stand for questions, and so is our chair, Pam Legend, who's here.
Thank you very much. Questions, commissioners? No questions. Okay, we'll take some public comment, and then we may have some comments as well. So anyone here who wants to provide public comment on this item? Anyone online? Okay. Well, Katie, I really appreciate the update. It's very good. When you're talking assessment standards and now you're knocking my jam. Like this is where, and I'm really excited to hear that. I wish the standards weren't compliant. That sort of jumps out at me, but that's an interesting choice of language there. But it's exciting to hear, especially I think for a group that is a lot of elected officials, how are they functioning as a group, and having an outside entity come in to sort of assess. I know early on we had in CJCC, we had problems with things like attendance. So I was happy to see that in there as something that they would measure in that assessment. And sometimes I don't think, that lack of attendance was unintentional, but it's important to say like just being there is really important. So it's neat to see that engaged in it. And if we can start to get to some of those standards and those expectations, I'm sure move faster for you. I think you undercut yourself on how fast you think this is going to move. I was trying to count in my head at one point how many new elected officials or appointed officials that you have. So new sheriff, new police chief, new DA. You know, I mean, that's a lot, and it takes time for them to build relationships. So I know it's tough work, and we're really glad that you do it.
Thank you.
And I will just highlight what you said about yourself in the beginning of this, Katie, and that I have observed to be very true, which is that you've been moving very intentionally. And I've really appreciated that energy that you brought to the position. And that, you know, a little bit slow, even if it feels slow to you, that's okay. And baby stepping a few things out is okay. You were new, and to Commissioner Kelly's point, there's a lot of other newness at play here, and the timing was a little bit kismet in that previous strategic plan was wrapping up, right? And so there's an opportunity in front of us to really imagine what the next, how we move forward from here. And it's the perfect opportunity to sort of reassess and regroup. And so I have been really appreciative of and proud of how intentional you've been in that work, and think that sometimes taking a little bit of time to let ideas percolate for our community partners, and to I know part of the work for you has been looking at these opportunities for national technical assistance, for outside perspective that really helps us build even more purposefully going forward with what this body means to us as a commission and to the larger community and system of criminal justice. So I'm really excited for the JMI technical assistance in particular, and think that is likely to give CJCC membership and you in particular a good roadmap ahead, to just keep building on and strengthening what we're good at, and focusing on where we can make improvements, and doing so with some articulated direction that's based on standards across the country. I think that's really important. So good work.
Okay, that closes out that agenda item. Appointments, commissioners, we had some that we stalled out on, or didn't stall out. We decided to wait a little bit. And I wondered if we were ready to make those HCC appointments at this point.
I have not had a chance to either follow up on the two we have. I mean, the one I've read through, the second one less so. Really that conversation about having some more rural representation on that body. It will take a little bit of time to find qualified, interested candidates that might fit that jurisdiction.
Sarah, do we have, do they not have a quorum at this point, or is anything if we drag our feet a little longer, because I think that's what I hear Commissioner Willie asking for, is a little more time. Do you know how that will impact that body?
I think the body is fine, but I do think, you know, they have done a lot of work to try to identify individuals so they can be partners in this process. So if you'd like to sort of, if we can pass that message back to Caitlin and the team that, you know, before we make these appointments, can we see if there are folks in the unincorporated area that could, you know, serve in one of these capacities? That's something we can take back, and then they maybe can help bring forward names as well.
And I thought maybe that was a conversation you'd already started with Caitlin.
Well, I
for that
kind of said
feedback.
maybe the next time. I wasn't
Okay.
sure if you wanted to do it for these two appointments. So if you want to do it before you make these two appointments, I can pass that back to say, let's see if we can do that now before. And I feel bad because those terms ended in May, and I was waiting on their recommendations, and I didn't pass that along to her. So if we can either tell her, I think they're fine with waiting. We can just go back to them and say, hey, is there anybody else on your list that was in the unincorporated area? How about approaching them? Or we could look at it next time around. It's up to the commission.
I think there are definitely people out there in the unincorporated area that care deeply about local history and local environments. So I think those names are out there. I would love it to have their help in identifying
Great.
some good fits.
We'll pass it on to Caitlin and that team and see if they can get us some additional names.
The Board of Zoning Appeals, did I hear correctly that both that are eligible for reappointment are both willing to be reappointed?
I don't think so. I think we've got one that is, we're still waiting to hear back if they want to continue to serve. I think we've got one that's willing to be reappointed and one that's not, but I'll check on BZA for next week.
Any other appointments, commissioners? Okay, miscellaneous, and we start with Sarah's weekly memo.
Thank you, commissioners. My memo's attached. Just lots of dates getting added as we get moved towards fall. So if commissioners want to attend the Schools Foundation breakfast, we can also make your reservations for that. So just let us know. I'll be out of town that day, but if you're interested, we can get you signed up for that. And then I just want to note that we did, as I think I mentioned last week, we have moved the work session for next week. So right now I do not have a work session at 4 o'clock on the 30th. And then that is all I have, commissioners.
Any other miscellaneous items, commissioners? All right, we're adjourned.